It's Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. We are live with Advancement Live, the weekly web show for college advancement professionals. Welcome on the Higher Ed Live Network, a product of edUniverse Media. Find us at higheredlive.com and join the conversation on Twitter using the HigherEdLive hashtag. Today's show is going to dive further into the use of crowdfunding in higher ed fundraising. I am your host, Andrew Gosen. I have three great guests with me this afternoon: Abby Reinhard from USeed, Bree DiGiammarino from IndieGoGo, and Michael Greenberg from ScaleFunder. We'll get the conversation going momentarily, but first I want to give a shout out to our Advancement Live sponsor, iModules. iModules software is the leading constituent engagement management provider for educational institutions. iModules delivers an integrated online platform that transforms how institutions strengthen constituent relationships and achieve fundraising success. iModules, we really appreciate your support in making conversations like these available to the broader institutional advancement audience. Today's show is going to continue exploring the impact of crowdfunding on higher education. 3 weeks ago, Colleen Wainwright gave us a sense of what it's like running a successful crowdfunding campaign, and Ryan Davies walked us through how Carleton University went about setting up their Future Funder pilot project. Carleton worked with a local digital agency in Ottawa to develop their crowdfunding platform. That is certainly one viable way to proceed. However, it is not the only way. On today's show, my guests are representatives from crowdfunding platforms that work with higher ed. Two of these platforms, USeed and ScaleFunder, have been developed exclusively for use in the higher ed space. The third, IndieGoGo, is a major player in the broader crowdfunding space that has recently begun to invest some focused energy in the higher ed vertical. We're going to start by learning a little more about each of these companies, and then turn our attention to some more general questions and issues surrounding the use of crowdfunding in higher education. And with that preamble, let's turn to our guests. First up is Abby Reinhard. Abby is co-founder and CMO at USeed. She brings 13 years of experience in development and communications to the table, having worked at Harvard University as both a development communications manager and on the front line, running multi-million-dollar reunion gift campaigns for Harvard College. Abby began her career in New York City at Porter Novelli as an account executive, helping to lead public relations efforts for Fortune 100 clients. She has a master's degree in higher education and leadership from the Harvard Graduate School of Education and a bachelor's degree in organizational studies from the University of Michigan. Abby, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to be here.
So Abby, to start with, could you please give us some background on USeed? What's the story behind the company?
Sure. USeed started out a couple years ago when our founder and CEO, Brian Sowards, was working with his alma mater, the University of Delaware, mentoring entrepreneurship students. And he decided to create this platform to help those students create the funding for their startups. And he very quickly realized that this could benefit all students to gain access to opportunities that will really enrich their educational experiences. And then from there, he realized that this is a major win for the institution too, as far as acquiring new donors and engaging alumni who are otherwise not connecting with the institution, and that if we could create a platform that the institution could manage and control and that works within the context of their existing infrastructure for transactions and for processing gifts, then it would be a win all the way around. And since then we went back to the drawing board after doing that prototype at UD and created the platform around what we learned and exhaustive research in crowdfunding, including interviews with students and alumni who have run crowdfunding platforms for university projects. And we created what we're now working with 3 universities on. We're doing our beta with Cornell University, Arizona State University, and the University of Virginia. And we're learning a whole lot, and it's very exciting to be working in this space.
Abby, thanks. So I know, having spoken to lots of people from many different types of institutions, that people who are beginning to explore crowdfunding platforms are spending a lot of time doing due diligence and exploring their options. What would you highlight as the most unique and exciting aspect of USeed to
Okay, Andrew, you cut out there for a second, but I think I caught your question, which is if I were to pick the most unique aspect of UC to focus on. You know, if I were to pick one thing, I'd say that we're really focused on understanding behavior. You know, what are the behaviors that make for successful crowdfunding campaigns? And how can we provide the tools and support to encourage those behaviors? Because, you know, you can't just put up a campaign site and expect the money to magically down to behavior. And so, you know, we're committed to really understanding that and supporting that, and therefore enabling institutions to use crowdfunding to create a meaningful stream of revenue by making these campaigns successful. And in addition, engaging with a large number of alumni and friends on a new level.
Fantastic. So is there a core conviction about crowdfunding that USeed held that has been borne out by the data, now that you've got data from a number of projects with institutional partners in hand?
Yeah, you know, it really comes down to the belief that you have to have an awesome story to tell. A campaign that tells a great story and has a committed group of volunteers that are passionate about it, that are passionate about seeing a project or initiative come to fruition, and therefore are going to, you know, spread the message to all their various networks. Those are really the two keys to crowdfunding success, and the data is supporting that.
That's good to hear, and this is something we'll get into a little bit later on in the show, but it feels to me like that really highlights the fact that crowdfunding platforms and the crowdfunding model is just as much of an exercise in storytelling as it is in actually raising dollars. And certainly those two things are not mutually exclusive, but to pretend that it's only sort of a new and sexy type of online donation form would be to completely miss the tremendous potential impact that the model has.
Right, and you can tell the story.
So what would you say is the most valuable lesson that you have learned from the initial set of projects across your partner institutions?
You know, I think, you know, what we're learning most about is how to manage this. You know, that we've proven that, you know, we have a tool that students and other volunteers can, you know, raise thousands of dollars in a matter of hours. And we're able to train them to do that in a couple of hours. But really, it's about how do we manage this process, and that's really, you know, what we're learning in our beta right now with the 3 institutions is around that. And coaching is key. Again, it's how do we support these teams so that they're successful. And we're actually going to be releasing a new version of UC this fall. That provides a new set of tools for institutions to manage that, because it's that project management piece that's really key, and the coaching piece. So, you know, that's probably the most important thing that we're learning about right now, and that we're committed to delivering to our customers to manage better.
If what you're saying really resonates with me, because these teams that are working on who either work or have worked in advancement know very intimately, is that volunteers can be your absolute most precious asset, but that it takes time to manage them effectively and in such a way that you are taking advantage of the skills that they have to deploy on behalf of your institution, and that you're also respecting their time. One thing that I find always is sort of toxic to a volunteer relationship is make work and ceremonial jobs that don't really impact the institution. So I think there's tremendous potential using crowdfunding as a volunteer engagement strategy, as well as the storytelling piece and the fundraising piece.
Yeah.
So to wrap up this initial segment of the show, you yourself worked in university development for a number of years. How do you think that Abby circa 2008 would have responded if Abby 2013 had showed up to pitch crowdfunding as something that she really ought to explore?
Well, 2008, the world really changed around us, right? I mean, the context in which we were operating as fundraisers changed when we hit the economic downturn. And we were talking in a renewed way about the importance of unrestricted gifts, right? And it wasn't just at Harvard. I mean, endowments across the board got hit, and so unrestricted gifts were really, current use, spend down, flexible gifts were really critical. And so I think, I would have been hesitant because of the directed giving that is inherent in crowdfunding. Now, USeed has built into the platform a way for the annual funds to get a win. But that aside, this is targeted giving. And but when I'm talking to folks, and more and more now than even a year ago, they're really not as hesitant in that regard, because they know that the data show that people give more if they know what it's going toward, if they feel a connection to the impact. And the fact of the matter is that this is a donor engagement tool. So you're engaging people who otherwise aren't picking up the phone, or they're not responding to your direct mail. So I think something shifted over the past year where people are really getting the power of this as an additional tool. Phoning programs, direct mail programs, I mean, they're all critical. And I give an unrestricted gift to my alma maters every year. I think it's critical, and I'm loyal. I think this is a new way to engage people online that were just otherwise not being effective at reaching. So I like to think that maybe even back then I would understand that. I will say that, and this touches on something that you were talking about a minute ago, Andrew, that this is really a technology that makes us better at doing some of the things we've always done in development, institutional advancement. That this is peer-to-peer asks, right? I mean, that was a huge, and volunteer management. That was a huge part of my job, was facilitating alumni to ask each other. And this is a way to use technology to be effective. And we always positioned, we always needed to tell stories, and that's, and we know how powerful the student voice is. That's why we invite students to our scholarship dinners. That's who donors want to hear from. So this is a way to, as you say, this is a storytelling vehicle to capture that voice, to tell those stories in an authentic and compelling way from the people who are the best advocates, who are the students, or the alumni who care about something at their alma mater, and then facilitating those peer asks and tapping into social networks. So, again, it's a lot of things we're doing already. It's just a way to use technology to reach more donors in an impactful way online.
Abby, thanks. I really like the way that you underscored the fact that the technology may feel novel, but it's really just helping us do something that we've always done that we know works for our audiences. I think Andy Shainlin from Alumni Futures and at Carnegie Mellon has written about this in a number of contexts about how we need to not be so distracted by the technology that we forget to focus on the behavior that we're trying to cultivate and engineer and influence insofar as we can. And I think you articulated that beautifully. So thank you for that introduction to USeed. Let's now turn to our second guest, Bree DiGiammarino. Bree is the Education Vertical Director at the global crowdfunding company IndieGoGo. She has a long history of involvement with the nonprofit sector. She's the founder of Kids Acting Out, as well as a former Bridgespan consultant and former Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation Social Venture Fund Senior Associate. She is passionate about the potential for crowdfunding to amplify the resources and voice of university communities, and she graduated from the University of Virginia and also holds an MPA in nonprofit management from the NYU Wagner School of Public Service. Bree, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So Bree, IndieGoGo is a large and well-established player in the global crowdfunding space. Can you walk us through the process whereby IndieGoGo decided to focus on education as a specific type of client and particular subset of project?
Sure. So IndieGoGo was founded back in 2008, very much on the belief that everyone deserves access to achieve their dreams. So we were founded for anybody, anywhere, at any time to launch a campaign to achieve their dreams. And we've really held very close to that idea of being the democratic version of crowdfunding. To that end, we've expanded a ton since we were founded. We're now in 196 countries where we have both contributors and campaign owners. And we're working working across topic areas, everything from health to a startup company to raising funds for your school to raising funds for a charity you care about to launching your next film. So we have a range of topic areas. And in December, IndieGoGo brought me on to lead up our work in the education space. And the reason that we decided to do that here was that we saw so much grassroots momentum in education use of IndieGoGo that it made sense to actually put some thought behind that and say, why are we seeing thousands of students at hundreds of universities and professors at many universities and administrations at universities using IndieGoGo, and how can we capture best practices from across those many use cases and actually help the field in a more intentional way to share those learnings and to build out those relationships and make crowdfunding even more impactful for achieving the purposes of those universities and students and professors.
That's great, and I love the way you told that story from the IndieGoGo perspective, because it underscores the point that from an institution's perspective, our alumni and our faculty are using crowdfunding platforms already anyway. So when we talk about adopting crowdfunding on an institutional basis, it's not like it's a question of, do we give faculty and students and everybody else permission to start thinking about this particular model? They're already doing it. It's a question of, are we going to try to provide them with an opportunity to do this in a way that integrates with established institutional fundraising practices? And even if we do that, I think the only way we can do it realistically is if we make it easier for them to work through the official channels than otherwise. There's no way in the world that we can possibly go with the stick option instead of the carrot option, because I can't imagine how many people you'd have to have working full-time to patrol all of the 500 crowdfunding platforms that are out there and make sure that nobody's violating brand guidelines or doing anything like that. We've got to make it easy for people to do this and offer people the carrot of helping them publicize their projects to the networks that we actually do have a lot of traction with already. So thank you. I'm fascinated to hear how this looked from the IndieGoGo perspective. In general, is there anything that you could highlight as characteristic of projects coming out of educational institutions that makes them distinctive as a category?
Yeah, well, we find that people contribute to campaigns for one of three reasons. Either they care about the purpose of what you're doing, so they resonate very much with why you're doing the campaign, or they like the perk or token of thanks that they're getting in exchange for their contribution, or they have pride and they want to be part of that participatory group. They have pride in participating. And the beautiful thing about universities is that there's the ability to really make the most of all three of those reasons. I would say leading with the pride side. So even just when you introduced me and you said, Brianna, you graduated from the University of Virginia, I mean, my instinct was to shout, "Go Hoos!" at the top of my lungs, because I have so much pride in being from the University of Virginia. And that's the feeling that's very common among college alumni and students world over. So there's really that amazing pride side. And then you also have the ability to take the projects that students are doing and really elevate the purpose of them. So sharing, why is it that these students are actually putting together a startup in the health space? Why is it that those students have an urban garden? Why are those ones helping to build the new performing arts department? And so it helps to really connect current students and elevate the purpose of why they care about what they're doing. And then thirdly, from the perk side, universities have just an amazing wealth of resources to leverage. So I often hear questions at university levels like, but we're not used to giving people things in exchange for their gift. It's not part of our standard model. We have tiers of giving, and that's what it is. And that is a great place to start, but you can jump from that and really leverage the amazing knowledge and resources you have on campus. Some of the most fantastic perks I've seen are ones where it's a key professor who everybody knows from their university. So for me, Professor Elzinga, who's an economics professor at Virginia, who's going to hold a webinar where I can join and hear what Elzinga is thinking about today. Or Professor Sabato is commenting on the state of Obama's work in policy, given his knowledge there. And so it's really bringing in and leveraging the assets you already have, but bringing them out to the world in a way that is a very strong set of perks.
That's fantastic. And I like the notion of pride in the alma mater, and then feels like that sort of pride is gaining an extra dimension if you permit people to make a small investment themselves in making something happen on behalf of a particular project or particular group. Once again, it feels to me like the donation is an important piece of the puzzle here, but it is certainly not the only important piece of the puzzle. It's that kind of interactivity and engagement and investment of one's personal resources in a particular project that's meaningful to the donor that really makes this a little bit unique in the broader institutional fundraising toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
So Bree, I'm trying hard in this show to help viewers wrap their heads around their options as they think about getting deeper involved in the fundraising space. So let me ask you a variant of a question that I asked Abby. What would you say is unique about putting up a project on IndieGoGo?
Yeah, well, the thing about IndieGoGo, a few things. One is that we're so open so that you can post a campaign at any time. Now, if you have a partner page with us, which is a place to aggregate campaigns coming out of a particular community, you do have the opportunity to curate and choose which campaigns you want to showcase. So, for example, if you're part of a specific university, you can have campaigns by those university students, alum, professors, staff showcased on your page, and you can choose which ones you want. Now, the beautiful thing about IndieGoGo is that we have such an amazing crowd. So we have the millions of people who come to the site every week. We have the millions of dollars that go through IndieGoGo every week. And the beauty of that is that crowdfunding actually brings to the table an opportunity to seize connections that you didn't even know existed. So, for example, one of our partners, the University of California, San Francisco, had a campaign up last year that was for research, and they had posted this campaign on their partner page. They'd raised a few tens of thousands of dollars, and then they actually got contacted because somebody had seen their campaign who wanted to support them more deeply. And so they got contacted because somebody saw the campaign, and then they received an $80,000 contribution directly out of that. So that's a really neat example of how those connections can be made when you bring together the crowd and help to enable those different connections. Now, the other thing about IndieGoGo is we are very dedicated to customer service. So we have a whole customer happiness team. At any given time, you can email support@indiegogo.com and get personal attention. And we also have folks like me who are very specific in different topic areas. So I'm always happy to chat. I'm just Bree, B-R-E, at indiegogo.com, and we have a whole team of campaign specialists who will look at campaigns and give you feedback. And we're in the weeds with you. We want to help you be really successful.
Fantastic. And since you mentioned getting down into the weeds, my next question gets down into the weeds, but in a slightly different way. So there's a saying that you shouldn't trust chefs who won't eat their own food. And there's got to be some sort of analogous saying for the tech space that relates to that. But that's not you. You're actually raising money yourself on behalf of your alma mater on IndieGoGo. Can you tell us a little bit about the Rotunda Ball project?
Yeah, so actually, Andrew, I know I walked through doing a quick screen share, so let me do that real quick. Hopefully you can see my screen now, and I won't play the video for you. You can go find it in your own time, but this is a screenshot of the Rotunda Ball campaign, which you can see me in this very silly outfit on the front of the campaign page, and we're raising funds here to support the restoration of the Rotunda itself. It's been such an amazing experience. I have a team out here of about 10 people who all came together and said, we are West Coast alumni of the University of Virginia. We know that they're doing a restoration of the Rotunda. We can't go visit the Rotunda in our day-to-day, but we want to show our support. What can we do? So we decided to put together the quintessential East Coast event of a black tie ball with the quintessential textile West Coast fundraising model. And together we came up with the idea to crowdfund for the ball itself. So this campaign actually raising funds and distributing tickets to come to a black tie ball. You can see that a bunch of the early bird tickets are already sold out, and we're getting close on our next level. But that's not the only thing we're doing. We've actually recently paired up with the university to more deeply think through opportunities they can provide, and we're about to go live with two really interesting models, an East Coast UVA Perk Week, where we'll have perks all related to the East Coast, things like hyperlocal perks from local vendors in Charlottesville, Virginia, to actually pieces of the rotunda that they have available for us to give out from back in the Stanford White architecture days. And then we'll have, following that, a San Francisco Perk Week will be hyperlocal perks for the West Coast. And if I had to say what I've learned by running this campaign is that, first of all, it's a heck of a lot of fun. I would now call these folks I'm doing this campaign with very much my friends, but also it is a lot of work. And so I think that that's something that it's important to remember, that running a campaign is much more than just throwing it up and then expecting the dollars to come. We've had to constantly be meeting, iterating, creating new strategies, but it's very much worth it, and we're excited to hit our $15,000 goal soon and hopefully go on to raise much, much more.
That's fantastic, and I love what you're doing with the hyperlocal perks. I'm also glad that you highlighted the fact that this simply takes a lot of time and thought as well. I think that relates to what Abby was saying about the amount of time that it takes from the staff side of things to manage bodies of volunteers, but it requires a lot of time and effort from the volunteers as well. And that actually kind of takes me back to the show 3 weeks ago when Colleen Wainwright was talking about how her 50 for 50 campaign almost turned into a full-time job. Yeah. So I feel like there are resonances here for me with some of the conversations that I think are falling by the wayside now in the social media and higher ed space about how, oh, it's free, you don't have to invest anything, it's great. And my colleague Keith Hannon here at Cornell has a saying that I think is great, that social media is only free if your time is worthless. And I feel like you can apply the same logic to crowdfunding. It's only a cheaper mode of crowdfunding if you don't take full account of the staff time and the volunteer time that needs to go into making this all work. So Bree, thank you so much. That was a great overview of IndieGoGo and how you moved into the higher ed vertical. And now let's move to our third guest for this afternoon, Michael Greenberg. Michael is the CEO of ScaleFunder, an official UCLA technology spin-out company revolutionizing online giving and data analysis in higher education. Prior to launching ScaleFunder, Michael was the Director of Innovation and Strategic Initiatives at UCLA. In this role, he helped to foster interdisciplinary research initiatives and establish novel funding streams. During his tenure, he helped create Startup UCLA, UCLA's first student technology accelerator. Additionally, Michael assisted in the establishment of a new X Prize to be hosted by UCLA. He has also served as Director of Global Business Development at UCLA, where he managed and designed a $5 million portfolio of major corporate partnerships. Before coming to UCLA, Michael worked in the energy sector as a technical consultant on behalf of clients such as Exxon and General Electric in the smart grid and upstream verticals. Michael received his BS in physics with honors from Loyola University in New Orleans. And Michael, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So to start with, please tell us more about ScaleFunder's history. So you started off within UCLA walls, if I understand things correctly, but you're now completely spun off?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was kind of an interesting story. In 2012, January of 2012, I was Director of Innovation, and some of the things that we were seeing in the Office of Research as well as in the Office of External Affairs were that crowdfunding was becoming this huge initiative for effectively what we called all the squeaky wheels on campus. So these would be the professors that just had their grants rejected, or student groups that may have just been defunded. And this was of an acute, I guess, awareness on campus, because at the same time, you had the federal government going through a sequester, and you also had state funding drying up. So really everyone on campus was looking for different methodologies for fundraising. Now, what we ended up seeing after a cursory search of the 500-plus crowdfunding platforms that you were referencing at the beginning of this talk is that hundreds of thousands of dollars were flowing outside the institution, but even more dangerously, the data was not being captured by the institution around who our donors were in those engagements. And it really blew a lot of minds on campus, and it harkened back actually to 2004, which was that magical year where Facebook kind of changed the game for alumni relations. So very quickly at UCLA, we started looking at what it would take to help both students and faculty to really get the word out on their projects but at the same time, what kind of infrastructural needs might be in place to really support them in those efforts. And also, we started to look at all of the external crowdfunding platform providers to see if any of them really solved the downstream needs we had. So profoundly, some of the biggest ones were this. The annual fund at the time was facing extreme pressures because, in a sense, we were being disintermediated. We weren't really part of the conversation anymore, especially in that all-important set of donors under the age of 35, which really make up the bulk of your future campaigns. We were finding that in the middle of our own campaign, we were having a tough time reaching them. You know, the idea of phone-a-thons and direct mail, you know, frankly, no one wants to be called on their cell phone anymore, even by their friends. And we found that with direct mail, it was going straight to their parents' house because they never really afforded it once they left the institution. So in a sense, they were going off the grid, and our conversations with them were becoming more and more difficult. Now, at the same time, we had these amazing projects that were being done on campus where, like I said, thousands of dollars were being raised, and those very same donors that we couldn't seem to get in through the front door were engaging with the campus, but totally outside of us being a part of that conversation. So with that being said, a deep discussion began around what it would take, and we realized very quickly crowdfunding wasn't what we wanted to build, crowdfunding in a nutshell. What we really wanted to build was a dynamic storytelling engine, because we realized there's actually something deeper here at play. And here's the example. There was a very rare article that went out. It was a PR piece on a laser, a femtosecond pulse laser that went out at UCLA. And you know, it was one of those myriad articles that go out around some esoteric piece of science. And someone in a magazine, a major pop sci type magazine, realized that what we really were publishing was this new thing that would photograph cancer in real time in the bloodstream. So in our PR piece, we made it this sort of inorganic piece around the deep science, but someone broke it down into a digestible type of material, and that article, which was not published by us, had 400,000 likes. And that's when we realized this was not really about donations. Donations were really the symptom of something deeper, and that's telling your story well. And I know that's been kind of a theme here today, and I'm sure we'll get into it more in Q&A. But we realized any platform we built had to have two key characteristics. One, it had to be a way where the university could showcase who they were and their greatest stories, which means that we had to have a sense of making sure it fit within their web ecosystem. It had to be on their domain. It had to be with their brand, because we studied what was happening. We found donors were getting very confused. They would go to external platforms, or even what we like to call the Groupon effect, where you go to Groupon, you get your coupon, you go to the mom and pop restaurant, and then you go back to Groupon. You kind of forget all about the mom and pop restaurant, because that brand transcends the brand you're dealing with. So that was the first thing. We had to make sure that this was deeply living on their web ecosystem. And the second thing was around data. We had to make sure whatever we were doing with the data, that was completely controlled by the university, and that we were surfacing key insights which were necessary for external affairs. And I'm sure you'll dig in on that in a little bit, but basically those were the two pillars that led to us building this out. So the UC system did a concerted effort where we worked with professors, we worked with top technologists. We spun the company out officially in March, and we now have a full-time team with offices in Westwood, California. And it's been amazing, because since our spin out in March, we've actually become market leaders in this space. We have 8 institutions now completely signed up, and we actually have 5 on deck. And so it's been a whirlwind, and they're all varying sizes, from a USC to a Pepperdine or a Boston University. And it's been really an amazing ride for us, seeing the different use cases too, because it's really not a one-size-fits-all mechanism. You know, the kinds of use cases and the things you'll need for a Cornell will be radically different from what you would need at CalArts. And I think that, you know, maybe in the Q&A that would be something else we could explore.
Thanks, Michael. That's interesting. So 2 points really stuck out for me there as being worth highlighting. The first is that this is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. There are going to be some organizations that have the capacity to think about sort of an enterprise-level implementation, and there are other institutions who are going to work really hard to create enough space for themselves to try just one initial teensy pilot project to just dip their toe in the pool of crowdfunding. And what's a good solution for one institution may not work for another. The other thing, I loved your story about the about the laser, right? Because it feels to me like we tend to be very, very good on a communications level anyway at explaining why, well, actually explaining the way in which the things that our faculty and our students and our researchers are doing impact the world for the better. And sometimes we do that in ways that are rife with technical detail, and sometimes they're sort of much more polished pieces that are just laying that case out. And these are very effective and they're really important, but what they oftentimes are not is fun or digestible or anything that you would actually read all the way through. So I love the fact that we're getting this undercurrent of focus on storytelling, and storytelling in a way that's appropriate for the web, for attention spans on the web, so on and so forth. So I think that's a sign that we got the right group of people on the show. So let me now ask you another variant of a question that I asked to both Abby and Bree. If you were to highlight one particular aspect of ScaleFunder to someone who's working in advancement at a college or university who is charged with exploring this space, what would that aspect be?
Sure. So that would be the flexibility of the tool. When you're looking at a solution that you need, you have to realize there's actually a fundamental difference between the classic unrestricted annual fund project, whether that's your 24-hour drive or your one-week drives around a central communication message, versus the plethora of projects that are bubbling up on each one of your campuses. And what we've realized at a very deep level is that putting things up on a page is really not what's going to just drive your traffic. There has to be a deep strategy around it, and we've built a huge team actually around this idea of strategy on launching different types of projects, but also how that plays as a first touch engine. So this idea of, if you're running a crowdfunding campaign, let's say, how does that then play with your downstream phone-a-thon campaign? How does that play with your upcoming, annual fund drive that you have in the spring? And how do you really bucket your constituents? And the second part about this would be, you have to make sure that whatever you're doing, you control your message in the background. Meaning, you're always layering on a bigger institutional message, otherwise you're being divorced from the conversation. So that professor or that student that's doing something amazing is your best brand ambassador. Make sure your brand's being carried with them, and make sure that you're looking at a tool that can do that. And we get deeper into what the technology is when we're doing our one-on-ones with folks, but we've invested heavily in some pretty special R&D, and I think that's why we've seen such rapid success with our clients and how we've been able to get into the market since March.
Great. So just to clarify, it sounds like you're suggesting that crowdfunding is not a scenario where you just put it up on the web and then you sit back and money magically rains from the interwebs.
And also that not every use case is the same. There's a profound difference between a grateful patient project in a hospital versus a student crowdfunding project versus even a faculty project, and then juxtaposing that with your unrestricted campaign that you run in the fall or the spring. So do you have a technology that's malleable enough actually to handle all of those different use cases?
Fantastic. Thank you. So a final question before we move off into a more general discussion. In your opinion, is it wise or even possible to try to extract lessons about crowdfunding from the broader crowdfunding space and then apply them to higher ed? Or is higher ed so influenced by unique opportunities and obstacles that it's difficult to draw these sorts of parallels?
So at the very highest level, it definitely does boil down to story. And I think that you'll find that the most profoundly successful campaigns are ones that have a story that resonates with their audience. I think where you start to see things separate out are actually when you're talking about different types of projects. So the purely philanthropic project, where you're trying to raise money for a cause, versus the transactional project where you're trying to build a widget and then give that widget to someone like you would see on a Kickstarter. Those are totally different. And while perks are very, as Bree referenced earlier, perks are very important. We built an engine that handles both perks or what we like to call impact maps, where people can actually just see the impact of their dollars. You have to really know the type of project. The good thing is here, education is both opportunities. You can have startup companies or different types of projects that professors are making that lend themselves to perks. but you can also have purely philanthropic projects that lend themselves to showing the impact of one's giving versus a transaction. And so that's why there's really not a one-size-fits-all approach, and you have to have a team behind you with good strategy when you're thinking about what you're trying to accomplish.
Fantastic, thank you. So let's move on now to a conversation about some of the broader issues surrounding the use of crowdfunding in higher ed. We've dealt with some of these tangentially already, but perhaps we can engage with them a little bit more directly. To start with, I want to think on a very pragmatic and tactical level. One of the reasons I was so excited that the three of you agreed to be on the show today is that you, of all people, have as much experience as anybody out there with talking to a range of people in higher ed at different levels and in different silos about the potential deployment of crowdfunding. So my first question to the three of you, and whoever wants to answer, please jump on in. As you're engaging in these conversations with people on campuses, what sorts of concerns are emerging? What do people seem to be worrying about as they consider taking this plunge? Who wants to go first? Come on.
I can go first. Go ahead, Abby. I just saw that your screen popped up.
Oh, no, that's okay. I mean, we've hit on some of them, right? I think the biggest thing gets back to how do we manage this? What's this going to take from the standpoint of our resources, and really staff time? And so that's something that we've been really focused on addressing with our existing beta partners and with everybody else that we're talking to and working with is how do we set up a program so that this is feasible and that this is going to foster success for your teams, and so that it works within the context of your office, and in a way that's smart, that really harnesses the power of what crowdfunding can do, and has the system of support around it. So that's probably the biggest thing that I'm hearing now, which is what does it take? What does it take to be successful? How do we have the people around this to support it? And so that's what we're really focused on delivering. And I hear that concern more now than this is Uber restricted gifts, on a small scale, which is sort of where I heard people's concerns, living more several months ago, a year ago. So again, I think we've pivoted in a way.
And just maybe to follow on to that, the silo effect has been pretty interesting. So we have multiple clients that have actually purchased from multiple parts of the university. So for instance, we have a top flight business school that's using it for their specific purposes, and at the same time we have areas of a university such as the annual fund or the Office of Research that are also using it. And they each have their core metrics they need to hit and their core use cases. And so sometimes there's a slight amount of confusion on how do we work together when we haven't directly worked together before. And I think that's actually where one of the most powerful parts of these tools come into play is we're really breaking down silos. And I know, Andrew, we've had conversation about this, and I've had multiple conversations with our clients around this idea of we're finally seeing the harmony of alumni relations, the annual fund, and the different core elements of campus come together, where we've usually only seen that in the major gift world, where major gifts was completely distributed across campus and had that sort of high-touch appeal on different specific areas. But once this level of specificity has started to enter the minor gift range, you're starting to see these silos breaking down and people working together and leveraging their resources. And I think whenever you're thinking about a provider, that's one of the biggest value adds they can provide, is how in the world, and we hear this all the time, how in the world do I in the annual fund build or select the projects that go on this pipeline? I can't tell the research office what to do, or I can't tell the Office of Student Affairs. And so we find that's probably one of the biggest questions, is this idea of we're now working together when we haven't before, so how do we build these new systems around it? And so that's, again, we can get deeper into that if you want. That's probably the biggest question.
Yeah, I would just echo that and say that actually at IndieGoGo we have two different models of crowdfunding partner pages for universities. So the first is the model used by UCSF. We recently had Marquette join on, and they're doing the more integrated model where funds go straight through the university and then are distributed out to campaign owners. Often they're taking a philanthropy fee and then redistributing the funds to the campaign owners. So in that case, it's very, very deeply ingrained into the university. Now, for other cases where there is perhaps more cross-departmental interest and the alignment as a whole entity hasn't happened yet, we actually see a very interesting model where folks at universities are creating partner pages where the dollars don't actually flow through the university, but rather they go straight to the campaign owners. So the university still has the chance to decide, yes, which campaigns they want to have on their partner page, but the funds are actually going straight to those campaign owners, be they students, faculty, alumni, etc. So it's with those types of relationships that we've set up partner pages with many universities, including Duke, Columbia, and it's interesting at Columbia we're working with both their entrepreneurship center as well as with their film program. So really interesting to see how those different departments can get their toe wet and start to really give it a go, really in a lighter touch way.
Fantastic. I love the fact that there's such a focus here in these comments about the fact that this is really only going to work if multiple silos work together in a way that they aren't accustomed to historically. For some reason, it's evoking for me that old parable, I'm not sure if this was Kipling or not, about the blind men who are trying to describe the elephant. And each of them individually is not giving a complete picture of it, but if they start working together, they actually get a pretty good approximation of what an elephant's all about. And I feel like that's the only way that this is going to end up having the impact that it can and should have in higher ed. This also, I guess I'm at the point in the show where I begin to wax philosophical here, but it's making me wonder if crowdfunding is not an opportunity in that it's forcing us to behave in ways that we're not accustomed to working, but that actually positions us to respond to a much more dynamic environment in which our constituents are living than we've had to deal with before. And if this isn't sort of a training exercise of sorts, or sort of a model that's emerging for work amongst advancement silos and then across the university that's going to position us to succeed in a number of other areas as well. So switching from, that first question was about playing defense. How do we alleviate people's concerns and anxieties about what crowdfunding might do to techniques and programs that have served us well for decades? What if we flip that on its head and we talk about the offense instead of the defense? How do you go out there when you're talking to people on campus and make the positive case for proactive engagement with crowdfunding in a way that just evokes the breadth and the scope of the opportunity that's right here in front of us if we're just smart enough and brave enough to reach out and take it?
So, yeah. Oh, go ahead. I keep doing it, Abby. I apologize.
It's cool. Well, okay, so I would just actually show them what we're doing. So I'll try to do a screen share here if I can. Let's see here. Is it going to let me? Okay, I need to open a new window here. So yeah, I would show them what we're doing and, you know, demonstrate the power of using the voice of your students and telling these amazing stories and engaging donors that you're otherwise just, you know, leaving by the wayside, or even your loyal alumni and donors. Like, I give an unrestricted gift to the University of Michigan every year, right? And I'll always do that. I think it's important. I also know if I were to get a message from my dance company at Michigan saying, we're trying to raise funds to create this new exciting work, will you help us make that possible? I would absolutely give to that. I would be so excited about it, and I would probably reach out to my friends who I danced with in college, you know, who I've been out of touch with, and sent it to them. And I would probably show up in Michigan to see the show if I could. You know, so if you think about this as like a new way of engaging alumni, even folks like me who give loyally, it's just tremendous. And then if you could think about, you know, so from the alumni relations standpoint, it's a huge opportunity. Even from the major gifts standpoint, it's a huge opportunity. I mean, imagine one of my peers that I reached out to is working with the development officer, has major capacity, gets really excited about her dance company in Michigan doing this you know, running this campaign, and shows up to see it. And here's an entry point for her major gift officer to talk about the new theater that they want to build. Or to get data on something that my alma mater doesn't know about me. They may know that I was a dancer. Is that I'm really passionate about environmental health. And, you know, if I found a way through crowdfunding to support Michigan's work in this area, I mean, I would love that. And then that's me being able to live out my passion, right, through my alma mater and engage with my alma mater in a way that otherwise I'm just not. And again, I'm a pretty engaged alum, I would say. So the data that you can get, from your alumni, and just providing this tool for them to engage in this really, exciting manner. And what I would like to show, if I can have like a second to pull it up, campaigns that we're running with Cornell that got overfunded in just over a week. And this was a way to give a sense of, here's how we can really tell a great story about something people care about. And so, is that working? There we go.
There we go.
Can you guys see my screen? Okay. So this is the story about a student-run organic farm, and students and faculty at Cornell wanted to raise funds to create essentially an outdoor classroom. And this got so much excitement. I mean, within a matter of hours, they raised thousands of dollars, and in just over a week, they flew past their goal. And so you can see here that you can connect with the faculty who care about this and hear their story. I'll click on one of the student leaders, Emily. Here she can tell her story about why she cares about this. And they were so effective at, getting alumni and friends excited about this story. So again, yeah, I think the case for this is beyond just dollars raised. That said, we are focused on delivering to our clients a tool that can become a meaningful, help them create a meaningful new stream of revenue, and as well as an engagement tool for alumni. But it's more than dollars raised. It is engagement.
Couldn't agree more. Bree or Michael, how about your take on the offensive case for crowdfunding?
Go ahead, Bree.
Ooh, the offensive. Honestly, what I would say is just give it a go. So start by doing something that's a small campaign, whether it's you in the development staff or you engage a student. I think the model that we're using with University of Virginia and having our San Francisco alumni group use crowdfunding is fantastic. I would for sure recommend that you look at the resources we have at IndieGoGo. We have tons of thought leadership documents and webinars that we've created. If you just Google IndieGoGo Field Guide, you can download a 20-page document full of tips and tricks for best practices. Look up IndieGoGo webinars, and you can see tons on different topics, including one specifically on research, including one specifically on education. So I would just give it a try, do something small, and really learn, because the first time you run a campaign is absolutely, you're going to learn a ton, which will help you to do bigger, better, more effective campaigns down the line. We recently had a nonprofit, Black Girls Code, which raised about $20,000 in their first campaign, which was a phenomenal success. It was past their goal. And then in their second year, which they just ran their second campaign, which raised over $100,000. So they learned a ton and took it to the next level for their next initiative.
Fantastic. Michael?
Sure. Well, the good thing here is, for everyone watching, you now have a lot of ammunition just from watching other schools now adopting it. So in a sense, by seeing what other people are doing and learning from them, that allows you really to have those good internal use cases. And I'll give one we just saw. We're finding the pipeline, the way we think of it now, is actually breaking down. So this sense of people graduate, they give $25, that turns into $100, and that hopefully turns into a major gift 20 years down the road, is really not the way people are engaging anymore. So what we've actually seen with our technology, in fact, we just recently did 3 projects that all funded out in 4 days for UCLA, and it was amazing because now they're all overfunding like crazy. But here's the secret. UCLA actually didn't promote those projects. So they didn't use institutional communication channels for them. What they did was they leveraged some of our special technology in helping to really harness how they got the word out. And then we were able to find, through our special tracking mechanisms, major donors that had never been engaged before or had been inert for 20 years. One of the most fascinating things that happened was we actually found an inert billionaire who came into the platform, gave a large gift, And not only did we find that he gave it in an area we had no idea he had an interest based in, this is similar to what Abby was talking about where she said, wouldn't it be nice if someone knew what my actual secret interest was? But also we find that our 20 years of asks to this person were in the total wrong direction. And then with our technology, we were actually then able to figure out how he got that ask, where it came from. We were able to trace the narrative back on how information gets to him and how he wants to engage with the university, all the way down to the fact that he was using an Android phone. And the fact that should just be a game-changing idea right there. The fact that a billionaire is not opening up your print collateral, he's engaging with you on the Android device. I mean, that is a wild new way of thinking. So what we're seeing now is, in a sense, this world that's opening up, where you can really maintain revenance and live where your interests are for your donors. And we think that's the most powerful thing, and now there's ample amounts of use cases out there to help you build your internal case and also really help you surface those stories that make your institution unique.
Fantastic. So I'm sensitive to time here. We have, realistically speaking, about 3 minutes left. So I'd like to conclude with just one final question. I'd like to ask you each to peer into the future, and where do you think higher ed is going to be with crowdfunding, say, 3 years from now?
I think it won't be novel. I mean, right now it's early days for crowdfunding in higher ed, and we are, collecting some good data, and we are data obsessed. As Michael was saying, I mean, there's so many interesting and valuable things you can learn through this mechanism. But I think in 3 years it's not going to be novel. It's going to be about how, and that's who we're working with now, right? We're excited to be working with folks who are on the leading edge of thinking about how can we make this as powerful a mechanism for us as possible. And I think that's where most everybody will be 3 years from now. It's not whether to do crowdfunding. It's how to make it as powerful as it can be in all the different ways that it can deliver value.
Bree or Michael?
I would agree. I think that we're seeing crowdfunding more and more. I actually believe that crowdfunding is going to be a tool that people are going to use in a very everyday way in the next few years, and it'll be sort of like how do you use PayPal, how do you use online auctions. It's an everyday piece of your life, and you actually use it in a multiple direction dialogue. So rather than it being a one-way conversation, we're going to start to see the people who are supporting campaigns, people who are creating campaigns, helping to inform the direction in which our schools go. For example, you could imagine a school creating a campaign saying, which of the following topic areas should we develop our online curriculum in? And depending on which perk you select, you're actually voting for which area of curriculum development you want. And I think we're going to start to see that multiple direction dialogue developing more and more in a very powerful and exciting way.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, I think what you're actually going to see is the emergence of a new way of even thinking about just online engagement. Right now we deal with what I like to call the static ecosystem. You have web pages where we push out content, and then we hope people come to us and absorb it, or we push things up to our Facebook page, and if we're lucky, they get a few hundred likes if you're at a large institution. I think what we're going to start seeing are people engaging with us on their own terms, and us building this new sensibility of reacting to their needs instead of dictating the conversation. And I think that that's going to really elevate the way that we engage. And more importantly, we'll make sure that institutions, as we move forward, are completely maintaining relevance. And I think that is the key thing. So I think 5 years from now, you're going to see an area where you come into the sort of choose-your-own-adventure type world in the university's online ecosystem, is the way I like to put it. And we're going to see the technologies and the skills and strategies developed in concert around that over the next 5 years.
Fantastic. As host, I get to answer my own questions when I decide that I want to. So I've actually got 2 scenarios in which I think if either of these ever comes to pass, we will know that collectively we have succeeded. I think that as we get more comfortable with crowdfunding, we're going to start seeing it used as a strategic tool in ways that simply don't make sense in the current ecosystem. And the 2 examples that I like to think about are as follows. One is one in which the communications folks have a story that they really, really want to tell, and they decide that they want to try to do that through crowdfunding because they think that's the most effective way of getting this particular concept out there and getting people engaged in it. And the notion of a communicator determining that there's going to be fundraising activity is completely the inverse of the way that the usual process works, right? The other one is a scenario in which a major gift officer who has identified a prospect but is having absolutely no luck engaging that prospect using any of the conventional approaches comes to the people who are thinking about the crowdfunding platform and designs a project specifically to be irresistible to this particular individual. And no, you're not trying to get the $10 million gift now, but you're certainly looking to start a conversation, and maybe that conversation is going to start in the form of a $25 gift to some particular project that connects this person directly with whatever it is on campus that he or she is most passionate about. I think if either of those two scenarios ever comes to pass, we will have seen a major evolution in the way that institutions think about the intersection of digital, of fundraising, of communications, and of engagement. So we're now at the end of our hour. I'd like to really thank the three of you for joining me today. I've had a marvelous time hosting this show, and I hope you've had a good time being guests on it. We may have to do a reunion at some point in the future to get to all the questions that we didn't have a chance to ask. Ryan Catherwood will be back to host Advancement Live next week with a brand new show on crowdsourcing. That's right, crowdsourcing as opposed to crowdfunding. At Advancement Live, we are all about the crowd. Ryan's got some great guests, so you won't want to miss it. He's going to be sharing the stage with Darren Brabham from the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism at USC, and Tom Dominic, who is Director of Digital Strategy for Duke Advancement. As always, you can watch more shows from Advancement Pros on the Advancement Live archive located at higheredlive.com. Thanks to everyone who tuned in live. See you next time, and once again, thank you so much to Bree, Michael, and Abby for being such fantastic guests. Thank you.
Thanks, all.